In this school,
Sir, I'll be right with you, okay? I'll be right with you. Okay, all right. I don't think you're finished getting our order. Okay, I'm coming. I'm coming. Okay. Wait a minute. Hold on. Hi, sir. May I take your order, please?
yes, you may. Let me have a stack of inspiration, a cup of motivation, a side of excellence with just a dash of extraordinary, and bring me an order of blessings with the plate of satisfaction, followed by a bowl of laughter with just a sprinkle of some personality. Better than that, just give me the Lady T show.
T, 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 T. Lay, D, lay, D, T, 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 T. Lay, D, T, T, T. Lay, D, T. Lady T is on your TV. Call everyone you know. It's time for the Lady T show. Don't you turn the TV. You will miss all of the information, inspiration, motivation. Now let me hear my Lady T fans. Lady T, Lady T, Lady T, Lady T fans, yeah. Lady T, Lady T. Now let me hear my Lady T fans. Lady T, Lady T, Lady T. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's time for the Lady T show. All right, cut, cut. It's a wrap. Cut, cut. Stop. Welcome to the Lady T show. I'm your host, Lady T, and I'm here with my co-host, Susta.
Hello, hello.
We have been gone so long.
It feels like a long time.
I feel like a fish out of water because we missed the last show.
Yeah.
We missed the last show due to the flood, and we have so many flood survivors out there, and we want to let you guys know that you can get in contact with the Lady T show. We do have connections with Kingdom Empowerment Ministries Incorporated. They are running disaster relief like you would not believe. So anything you need,
It's awesome. Covering children, men, women.
exactly. So anything you need, get in contact with us. Use that email, use the number at the bottom of your screen, and we will get you the help that you need. Now, seated to my right is Mr. Victor Jones. How you doing, Mr. Jones?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm excited to have you here because you have a unique story, unique testimony. Now, this show is about domestic violence, and it was actually put together, is sponsored by the Edgecombe-Nash Domestic Violence Task Force. Now, are you a part of that task force?
I am a part of that.
You are, okay. Wonderful. So they're sponsoring this, and October, for those of you that may not know this, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So this show and next Sunday on the next show, we're going to have someone from that task force here to kind of help us raise awareness about domestic violence and help us to see what we need to know, what we need to be doing, how we need to be helping other people. Because the sad part about it is, Mr. Jones, is that some people may not even be aware that they are in a situation of domestic violence. And Sister, I don't know if you remember, maybe a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, we had Ebony Moore on the show.
Oh yes, she was the comedian.
Yes.
Yeah.
She had been experiencing domestic violence, and she shed some light on it for us. People think it's being beat, or if you're not being beat, it's just verbal abuse. That's not domestic violence, but that is not true. That's not true. So we're going to have Mr. Jones tell his personal testimony, and I say it's unique because he's a male.
That's
right. And we think about domestic violence,
we think women.
Automatically think about
women,
and I think TV has done that for us. Watching shows on TV, you
stereotyping that.
Exactly. You see women. So Mr. Jones, I want you to tell us your personal story of domestic violence.
Well, all right. Well, my personal story really goes back to being a child and growing up in domestic violence and how it affected me. So if you don't mind, I'll read my story so I get it all out the first time. My story speaks to the complicated nature of domestic violence. I recall my father being a well-respected man. He worked 2 and 3 jobs to provide for the family. We were never hungry. Always had a bicycle, and my mom always had nice clothes to wear. We attended church every Sunday and went to the beach several times each summer. I always knew my father loved me and that he was trying to work with my mother to provide a stable life, but I found it difficult to concentrate in school. I didn't take life very seriously at all, and I didn't understand why. I remember being very playful most of the time, but every day around 5 o'clock, my mood would change because my dad would come home around 6 in time to watch the news, and the certainty of a good day would be over. I didn't know if there would be an argument over something small, usually something so small I had no idea what was setting off the argument. But quite often it would be hostility, a low level of a seething, rather than a major display. Those would come later in the evening or on the weekends when I was away with my older brothers. Many nights I would wake up to the sound of shoving and pushing in the kitchen, the sound of a chair sliding across the kitchen floor, the sound of a person being pushed against the stove or the refrigerator or the cabinet, muffled sounds as my parents fought while trying to keep me from hearing what was going on, but I heard them. One night my mother woke me up, told me to go outside and get in my brother's car. I didn't see her when she woke me up, but when we were getting in the car, I saw she was wearing shades at night and her lip didn't look right. We stayed with my brother for a week. Then we went back home like nothing happened. What was I learning through this? I've been told there was a lot more open violence before I was born. My father worked part-time as a barber and had a straight razor. When I was older, 12 or 13 years old, my father cut my mother on the shoulder with a razor. I helped her to bandage the wound. I was a tangle of conflicts. I hated my father and I loved my father. In my work, I've learned that domestic violence is often a tangle of conflicts. My father had a great deal of personal pain that he tried to drink away. I don't know if he was drinking before every violent event, but there are some things I do know. I know that no one forced him to drink. I know that alcohol doesn't excuse domestic violence. I know that having grown up exposed to domestic violence, I was at a higher risk of becoming abusive, becoming involved with drugs, or engaging in criminal activity. As a DV counselor, I tried to work with the person inside the abusive behavior, realizing that this is often the product of exposure to violence as a child. Every offender that we help to stop that behavior is going to represent about 3 to 5 children that will either see a change or never see domestic violence at all. So I truly believe that a major key to stopping domestic violence is stopping it before the child is exposed at all.
Wow. That is a very touching story. Very touching story. So I don't even really know where to begin. What you describe is just so.
I want to say he touched on all of it, and it's something before he moved on later. He started out saying they went to church, they did things together. Mm-hmm. A normal family nowadays to us would do.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And it troubles me because people are men. We're taught, men are the head of their family. Mm-hmm. And to have this go on, and you go to church, you read the Bible, you know God, and this and that. But to have family, it's like 2 different lives. I want to take my family to church, but then there's another life over here nobody sees.
Right.
And our awesome pastor often says, don't let the clothes fool you. And behind every praise, there's a story. Mm-hmm. There's a story. And nobody knew, I would say.
Right.
So was there something that triggered this? Because you said we went to church every Sunday, he worked hard
it's
for
like
his family.
It's like a routine.
Was it something that triggered you did mention it was going on before you were born, though.
It was going on before I was born, and my dad had some troubles coming up, in his own childhood. And I don't know all of what went on, but like most people who become involved with domestic violence or even with substance abuse, there's some level of childhood trauma. Something has happened in their lives, and it's kind of like the wires get a bit crossed.
Would you say it's generational?
You could say that.
And
it's kind of like an inherited behavior.
Right.
So anything our children see us doing, they tend to do.
Exactly. And that's, you mentioned something. I have a friend that talks about pattern interrupting that pattern. So I commend you, because it could have been duplicated in you.
Absolutely.
So what about your own personal relationships now? Did you find yourself struggling with being a domestic violence offender, or?
I think growing up, I was, like most folks, especially maybe men, grow up wanting to protect their mom. So I was not violent, but there's a little thing in my head. I would be violent with other guys. I was kind of quick to fight,
You was like more
I don't know, I was
the
good at
protector,
fighting,
the
but
protector role. Right. You got in the protector role.
Right, and that was kind of my normal. So
Right.
it was kind of like my emotions would go from everything's lovely, we're playing and everything, to just kind of flipping over and being willing to fight with someone.
Wow.
So
it did affect you.
Oh, absolutely.
It did affect you. So,
Absolutely.
So, and I see you're married.
I am.
So have you seen any indication that you grew up with a domestic violence household?
Other than just being maybe argumentative in those early years, not very sensitive, kind of wanting things my way. Definitely in those early years. My wife, she didn't let me get away with that for very long, but
That's right.
but yeah, definitely. I can look back on that and I say, wow, I really said that. I really had that type of attitude, the selfishness.
So would you
early
say the
on.
situation itself, you having to grow up to protect, kind of almost like you were the man in your mom's life, the protector?
I probably wanted to be, but you're talking about a little kid.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fear growing up, with a lot of fear growing up, but not acknowledging it.
So would you say it kind of desensitized you?
That's a good word. That's a
little
good
bit?
word. Yes, desensitized. That's a really good word. I'm
Because I'm
to be
saying,
hypersensitized to some things and undersensitized to other
exactly,
things.
exactly.
Yeah,
It just
that
makes you
sounds
numb.
And
you know?
were you the oldest?
I was the youngest.
The youngest.
Oh, wow.
I was the youngest. Actually, I really think that my brothers, who saw a lot more than I did, that they would kind of rescue me in a way, because they would take me away a lot of weekends.
So they were grown or out on their own? They were out on their own?
Yeah, they were on their own.
So how about now?
17 years older than me.
Are their lives affected by that now? How are they coping?
I think that they had each other, and so I think that they did well. They did well. Very successful with their families. But my brothers were from my mom's previous marriage, so they didn't see.
Oh.
So that didn't occur really in their formative years.
Gotcha.
Okay. For me, you could say it was probably from conception forward.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I have to take that attitude. I have to understand that when I'm working with people who are coming in with domestic violence in their lives, who are coming in as offenders. So I'm not just looking at the person that has hurt another person. I'm looking at a child that has been hurt.
Right.
A child that has been, scared most of their lives. And this is kind of coming out in this way,
Right.
in the way of domestic violence.
Now, when we started the show, I think I mentioned something about we think about domestic violence, we think about females, but actually your story is not, you were receiving the domestic violence. It affected you too. even though you weren't being hit or you
Right.
weren't being beaten, it affected you.
Right.
And I think the physical
emotional
bruises,
scar.
emotional scarring can be just as bad as physical.
To me,
Just as
Some
bad.
people say worse.
yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of
because
people say worse.
you can heal from physical scarring, but the emotional impact that it
Yeah,
has.
the brain records
Mental,
everything.
yes, yeah.
Everything.
And then you mentioned that children who experience that later in life, they end up having hard lives to live. Or
Yeah. Well, we have to consider domestic violence itself is very stressful. So some of the early signs that you can see in a child are going to be like a high susceptibility to physical illnesses, the flu, headaches.
Wow.
Yeah, because your body's putting forth so much energy into just keeping a person going, it can affect your immune system.
wow.
So children
And
will.
then never on top of that, you're talking about mental issues coming along, depression and
Anxiety.
coming along with that. So
Right.
there's a lot of challenges I would think for a child,
It
any
is.
child to have to deal with.
That's right.
And I want to commend you.
Yes.
And just say that there's a purpose behind the pain, but I want to also ask a question, Lady T. Did your mom break free from that? Or did she remain, with the pattern going back or making, taking up for him and he didn't mean it? What, did she finally break away from that? Or did she even understand what was going on with her?
Probably not fully understanding, I would say. But they stayed together and the violence stopped, which is fortunate. I wouldn't bet on violence stopping at all.
Why do you think it stopped?
I don't know.
Do you think
Some
maybe
of
because you were so young, maybe you don't recall?
Well, I think it had really scaled back a great deal. So maybe, I guess I would say that it stopped because I was becoming older enough to be more and more aware of it.
So were you like speaking out more?
No.
Like,
No, I think again, domestic violence is a really complicated thing, and I think they both knew that it was wrong.
it was time to just.
Yeah, and so they kind of.
So you think in his mind, your dad, he's thinking, well, the sons are getting older. If they even think that this is happening, or they see that this is happening, they're going to come to their mom's rescue.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Because being young boys, he's kind of at an advantage. You
Now,
don't really know.
Yeah, that does happen. That does happen. There's a recent situation. A young lady is in the news now. I think her first name is Bria, who shot her father because he was violent to the whole family. So children, it's not unheard of for a child to act on their parents' behalf, on their mother's behalf, and to act out violently to try to save the family.
So let me ask you this, because I noticed something, growing up, I noticed that women that were, say, 50s, 40s, their aunts and sisters and moms would tell them,
It's
you
normal.
need to stay there.
Yeah, it's
You need
normal.
to stay there. This is normal,
Don't get on his nerves. Try to stay out of his way.
Right.
Just, yeah.
So was that outside influence there in this situation?
I'm sure. I'm sure. But you mentioned church. I was probably 17 or 18 years old before I heard a sermon that included the issue of alcohol. And probably well into my 20s or my 30s before I heard anything about domestic violence in a church. So, and interestingly enough, the reason I became involved as a domestic violence counselor, a pastor, Tilda Whitaker, came to me and wanted me to put together a program, to help put together a program to address domestic violence among women.
She does a really good job.
She
working
really
with the
does. And she, and at that time, I think there were 2 or 3 pastors in the Nash and Edgecombe area that had known that there was some domestic violence in those situations. So it's happening. There's this double life that's going on.
Yeah.
all around us all the time.
And you never know. You can't tell by looking at people all the time that it's going on. That's
Not
why
at all.
we're offering this platform. Just kind of reach out to those out there in the community that may be watching. You need help. You need to get help. We want to offer you that help now. And Mr. Jones, we want to get to how they can get help. We want to get to that. And I did receive a message from Miss Richardson, Talisa Richardson. What is her role with the Nash Edgecombe? Is she the coordinator? I believe she's the coordinator for the Nash Edgecombe Domestic Violence Task Force. It's maybe her calling in now, but
That may be her.
okay, because we definitely want you to offer the help
Yes.
to people watching. They're not gonna, it may take something like this for them to come forward. You're live on the Lady T Show.
Good afternoon, this is Talisa Richardson.
Hey, Miss Richardson, how you doing? Can you turn your TV down just a little bit for me?
Can I what now?
Can you turn your TV down for me?
I sure can. Give me just a minute. And just so you know, it is a delay in me hearing you.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to explain a little bit about what I do with the Domestic Violence Task Force. I'm just a member of the Domestic Violence Task Force. I'm actually, leading the committee that we led to actually do this production on the Lady T Show. But my role in the community is, right now I work with the Department of Social Services, and my past role was I work with the agency called My Sister's House, which is a domestic violence agency. And so I heard you say, how do people get help if they are in that situation? The best advice I could give is if somebody knows somebody, or if you are that somebody, to call into My Sister's House, into the 24-hour crisis line number, which is 252-459-3094, and any advocate there would actually be able to help you.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Miss Richardson. Mr. Jones is here. He's doing a fantastic job offering the information to us. So we definitely want to make sure that we continue with the next show on next Sunday so that we can continue to reach out to the community.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And on the next show, next Sunday, hopefully we will have somebody there from either My Sister's House, the agency, myself, or anybody that normally deals with domestic violence.
Wow. I appreciate you working with us, Miss Richardson, and we'll be in contact.
And we do appreciate it as well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. She said somebody from My Sister's House. It takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to do what you're doing.
It does.
So what I want you to do, Mr. Jones, is just kind of, you mentioned that you work with domestic violence offenders. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you work with the person that is causing the domestic violence, or the person that has the issues with. How did you get into doing that? Because it seems like to me you would have chosen a path of being on the other end, but you're actually working with the.
Well, I've been a mental health counselor for about 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a little bit more. And so I had worked with families with regarding domestic violence issues, but in a very small. It wasn't a lot of my business that I was doing, and largely because I wasn't asking the questions. It was only after Ms. Whitaker came to me that I really buckled down and started studying the issue and realizing how prevalent the issue of domestic violence is. So as I asked more questions about it, I would get more people saying, yes, that's what's going on in my life. And quite often people would not say that was the reason that they were depressed, because as you said, they're not even identifying their anxiety or their depression or even their bipolar disorder or anything else coming from that type of stress. So learning to ask those questions and realizing that is a major part of it is part of it. So about 10 to 12 years ago, when I started working with domestic violence offenders, started with the WAVE program, Women's Alternatives to Violent Expression. And the WAVE program was for women offenders.
Wow.
And we started out with 3, went down to 2, went down to 1, but that 1 graduated. And that was kind of getting my feet wet in the area of domestic violence. And then a few years later, we started working with the male offenders.
Right. So would you say your need to just want to understand why your dad did this, maybe that kind of pushed you into the direction, into that direction?
Actually, I think I just wanted to help. You know what? Probably I identified what women were going through with what my mom had gone through.
Right.
But I think initially I was wanting to help children who were being exposed to domestic violence, because quite often you have domestic violence and you have child abuse and you have substance abuse. So those three things kind of interact. Where you have one, you're going to be more likely to see
So just
another
open the
or
doors
see a
to
third.
something else.
Yeah, so since my work had been largely with children, that was right there at my heart to work with kids. But
Gotcha.
all that expanded.
Have you forgiven your dad?
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, I had not come to a true realization of everything that was going on while my dad was living. And emotionally, yes, I have. It's as I understand more about how a child is scarred and then carries that unresolved issue into adulthood. So, and I think that helps me out a great deal when I'm working with the adult offenders now. As I said, I'm not looking at folks as being bad necessarily, but
There's
as
a root
being
cause,
hurt.
right.
So while we're wrapping it up, a person that is an offender, is there a certain profile? We had a question from a viewer. Is there a certain profile that they must meet before you help them, or before they can receive help from you?
No. I would say anyone that is being abusive towards their partner should just come on and start talking about the issue. It's kind of an individualized thing, but we're not really where we would turn anyone away.
So if you're being abusive, mentally, physically, emotionally, verbally, give them the number, Mr. Jones, that they can get in contact with you. Is that same number that Ms. Richardson gave?
They can call my sister's house.
Okay.
We have a partnership with my sister's house, so they will refer you to us. But then my office is Valiant Families Counseling Service. And so the phone number is 252-451-4451. 252-451-4451. That's right.
And you can always call my sister's house and they can get in contact with you as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones. Your life is just a testament of how pain can definitely be turned into purpose. And I still have to say, going to church every Sunday, it paid off. It paid off because you are now ministering to other people. You're helping them out, and I commend you. And I believe that your path is being ordered by God, and it will continue to be ordered by God. That number again, 252-459-3094, is the number to my sister's house. Join us next Sunday for the Lady T Show. We're going to continue this domestic violence task force. Hopefully we can have you back. Let's talk with Ms. Richardson about it. Want to thank Kingdom Empowerment Ministries Apostle Emma Dickens for your sponsorship. Want to thank Lee, my stage manager, also Sandra for your support as well. My co-host, want to thank Aunt Brenda, Uncle Norm, Dazzler, and Deborah Cofield for watching. Thank you all for watching as well. This has been the Lady T Show. See you back Sunday at 6:30.